Hey everybody, I'm going to talk a little bit about more about scheduling in this video, just to tag team off of the last video. So when we're doing scheduling, we want to talk about our forecasts, right? And forecasting, I know we're going to cover another chapter, but forecasting is really looking at a crystal ball and trying to figure out how many customers do we think are going to be coming into our restaurant, right? And we should break those down even by the hour or quarter hour to determine how many employees do we need for a meal period, right? When I used to do forecasting in the hotels, I would break it down by meal period. Okay, how many guests do we think are coming in for breakfast, how many for lunch, and how many for dinner? And if I had multiple restaurants in a hotel, it's like, okay, how many are going into that restaurant for that meal period, and that restaurant for that meal period, right? And then would have different performance indicators depending on the restaurant. If I had a buffet restaurant versus an a la carte restaurant, I'd have different number of expectations for my employees, right? I would say, okay, a server in the buffet restaurant could do 40 customers in an hour, and a server in the a la carte restaurant could only do maybe 15 or 20 customers an hour because there's more visits to the table, you're bringing out the food versus the self-service of a buffet, right? We're going to use our business history to help forecast that hourly volume. Good place for forecasting to start with is history, right? And keeping track of that's super important, right? How many people did we do for Christmas last year will be a good indicator of how many people are going to come in for Christmas this year, right? Final schedules should always balance the employee constraints, the full-time versus the part-time, and the available hours with hourly forecast also accounts for the additional work like prep and cleanup time, right? So not only are your servers serving the customers, they're doing roll-ups, they're doing side tables, they're clearing tables, there's all those other duties that don't directly deal with the customer, but they impact the customer's experience, right? So you need to make sure that that's included, right? Scheduling guide or a basic template that you can have laid out of how many servers do we need for shift, with the scheduled tasks that don't fluctuate greatly with the business, right? So sort of a template that if we had 0 customers come in, how many servers or how many cooks do we need to actually run the business? That's sort of your baseline that you need before you even start adding any forecast, right? Schedulers must factor the employee's skill level, vacation requests, and wage rates, right? All of these things come into play when next chapter, when we start to actually calculate the cost of our labor, right? And we should always try to minimize idle employee time. There's going to be downtime between meal periods, but other duties should be going in there. If it's in the kitchen, there should be prep things that need to be prepped, right? If there's front of the house, there's, floors need to be swept, things like that, right? And short shifts or split shifts even, depending on where you're working, right? And you should always evaluate your schedule efficiency to see how to improve in the future, right? You're going to do a forecast of your customers that are coming in, and you say there's 200 coming in, maybe 250 come in. So did you have to add more people to that? Or maybe only 150 came in, so you had to let people go early off of the schedule, right? How did you manage that compared to the actual real world situation, right? So for fixed staffing needs, you have your salaried staff, right, that are scheduled based on when duties should be performed, not on business volume. So your chef needs to be there when they're dealing with their portion of the job, the ordering, the dealing with clients or bridezillas or whatever, right? Not necessarily need to be there when the restaurant is at its busiest. That's maybe the sous chef's responsibility, right? It depends on the structure of the operation. The bigger the operation, the more sous chefs you have to look after, different restaurants or outlets where there's sort of the mini chef of those areas, and the executive chef looks after the hotel as a whole, and they need to be there when the rest of the department heads are there for the hotel in order to get the information that the kitchen needs to coordinate business in the hotel as a whole, right? If it's just a mom and pop restaurant and you're the chef and you've got some line cooks, well, you should definitely be there when it's the busiest on a Friday night, right? It just depends on the type of business that you're running, right? Multiple supervisors should not oversee the same group simultaneously. What's this talking about is if you've got so many salaried people, if you say you have a restaurant manager and two salaried supervisors, you shouldn't have all three of them on there at a time, right? Those should be split up across your schedule so that there's always a supervisor on duty should the need arise for a customer complaint or issue with staffing or whatever, right? Like I just alluded to, right? At least one manager should be available when customers and employees are present, right? Salaried employees, you should always schedule them for their 40 hours per week, unless they're taking their vacation. You're paying them a set wage, doesn't change whether they work 20 hours or 45 hours, but you should be scheduling them to be working at least 40 hours, right? You shouldn't be scheduling them to work 60 hours. That's taking advantage of them, right? But you should be scheduling them to work for 40 hours because that's what you're paying them for, right? So a little more advice on scheduling. Post your schedules at least 1 week in advance so employees can make personal life changes and to avoid conflict with work. I know that's easier said than done. I've had struggles with that, especially with, our business fluctuating the way it does. I would always try to post my schedules at least a week out. Although by the time the week arrived, there was probably changes to that schedule as I got more information, right? It's like, oh, no, we've got 50 people coming in for dinner on Thursday night. Hey, Bob, can you work tonight? And add to that schedule. Or, oh, this function canceled. Sorry, buddy, I'm going to have to cancel your shift, right? But the bulk of the schedule should be posted as far out as possible so that people can plan for their lives, right? Advanced posting allows time to correct errors also. It's a good point because I've written many schedules in my lifetime, and inevitably you have an employee come to you, hey chef, there's nobody working the grill station on the line tonight. Oh, I guess I missed that. Mistakes happen, right? But if you post it early enough, generally your line cooks are going to look and say, hey, who am I working with tonight? And if they're missing somebody from that schedule that's generally there, they're going to ask you, hey, did you make a mistake? Did you miss somebody? Are we just not that busy? Or what's our plan, right? So you have time to correct those errors, right? If there are errors and last minute things pop up, you should try and spread those extra duties around your entire schedule, right? All your employees that are on there. Don't just keep going. Okay, Bob's great with coming in on short notice. We're just going to keep calling Bob because Bob's getting all the extra hours. You should spread that wealth around. And maybe, Bob says yes all the time, but maybe Bob gets tired of it all the time, right? You might get frustrated and not say anything, right? Until it's too late. So, all right. So that's it for a little bit more on scheduling advice. Next one is the next chapter. We're going to be actually calculating costs and applying those, looking at it much like our food cost percentages.